welcome to the Here and Now show. I'm your host, Lavonda Ray. And if you tuned into my Here and Now show, you know that the Here and Now show is a show where I've taken real life events and turned them into a positive living. If you have any questions or any comments, feel free to leave it in the message box. If you tune into my show, you know that the Here and Now show is a show where you can leave comments or questions or comments if you have any questions or any comments, because I believe that all voices matter. So if you know, well, I'm coming from the Midwest where we come in, and show out. Gotta love your city. Hello, somebody. So, with that being said, let's start the show. Welcome back. Welcome back to the Here and Now show. I am so blessed to be here, and you should be blessed too. If you've been rocking with me from day one, I want to say thank you. And if this is your first time tuning in, welcome to the family. Because the Here and Now show is a place where I've taken real life events, it's real life people, real life situations. And sometimes I may say things that other people should say, but they don't want to say out loud. But today, we're talking about something, a topic that someone had emailed me, and not only did this topic was emailed to me, it's also a topic that I feel like that we should be addressing in 20 and 26 to 27. So if you're listening, grab your snack, grab you something to eat, or that evening coffee, or that evening dinner, or that cold bottle of water, or if you're listening in your car, or you're sitting on your couch, or getting off work, or going to work, or if you just walking around the house talking to yourself, it's okay, because sometimes you can be your best company. So welcome to the show today. Like I said, today we're talking about bullies, right? And how that needs to stop. But we're not talking about it tomorrow. We're not talking about it next year or when somebody gets hurt. We're talking about it today. But before we jump into today's conversation, I wanted to recap of what we talked about last Tuesday. I talked about becoming the best version of yourself, accepting your growth, and letting go and letting God, and how that stress is not a lifestyle, and how that the person you used to be, you are no longer that person. You will not tolerate the things that the old person used to tolerate. You recognize your worth. We talk about, sometimes your biggest glow up doesn't have to be your hair, it doesn't have to be your clothes or your car, your banking account, even though all those things are absolutely beautiful to have. But it's also saying, essentially, I am not accepting that anymore. So let's get into a little bit of jazz for a minute, kind of set the stage, get into it. So we're going to play a little jazz for a moment, grab that tea, get into the moment, and then we'll come back and we'll dive into the conversation. So let's do that. Hey, don't know I'm not in. I'm just getting started. That's just the jazz before you get into it. Welcome, 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 welcome. Okay, so I am so glad we are back today. And today, like I said, today's conversation. How you doing? That you are aboard. Glad to see you. I'm glad you're here. Today's conversation is about bullying. It is not something that just happens on the playground, right? Bullying can happen anywhere. In your neighborhood, in your relationship, in your family, online. And yes, grown folks bully other grown folks. And I know that sounds crazy, but it actually is a thing because it's true. Now, what can we do to stop bullying? And when I say we, I mean like we as everybody as a whole, like children, teenagers, adults, grandparents, men, women, friends, family, all of us as human beings, co-workers, everybody, because at the end of the day, we're all human beings. So let's just start with something simple. Like, what exactly is bullying, right? To me, bullying isn't just something that, you know, someone says one time. Bullying is something that it involves a repeated behavior, meaning to hurt you or to embarrass you, to threaten you, to control another person, and it can also be physical. It can be verbal, it can be emotional, it can happen through social media, It can happen through text messages. It can happen through rumors, and sometimes the bully doesn't even have to put their hands on you to become a bully. And that's just attacking a person's confidence. Sometimes they don't have to hit you. They can just attack your confidence. And that alone, words is very power. And sometimes people don't realize that those words that can leave bruises that nobody can see. Now you can just, you can easily tell somebody, hey, people always bother me in school, and I'm sorry that that happened. And that's what we're talking about today, because that's not right to bully you or bother you at school, because, you're supposed to go to school and you want to be there, you want to be happy, you want to enjoy the moment, you know, and so I'm sorry that you have to go through that, and that's just what is that. I don't know why my internet people are trying to call while I'm streaming, so that's why the connection may get a little weird. Um, and it doesn't make it easier for people to say, you don't want, and I'm sorry that that's happening to you, because, and if you want, you could tell me what grade. Do you like my therapist? I don't know your therapist. But but what I was saying, no, I do not know your therapist, but words can bruise people in places that nobody even knows about. Just imagine hearing those words every single day. And what if that person is already struggling with their confidence? Hello, how are you doing? And what if they're already struggling with confidence? What if they go to school every day wondering, I'm scared to go to school? Are they scared to go to their job? Are they scared to open up their cell phone because of media, or they don't know who or what they can trust? Everybody's battling something. No one knows nothing. No, we're all battling. No one knows what you're battling. That's the thing. That's why sometimes it's good to talk about it. It's good to let people know, hey, I feel this way. No, I meant you. Oh, okay. Well, I could be like that. And I don't mind doing that. If there's something I can help you with virtually, I would love to do that. But I have, and those are the real questions. That is, how do you stop bullying, kids? You can't just say bullying is just a kid thing, because bullying goes everywhere. um, Suppress is depression. We all need. That's right. That is beautifully how you said that. That's right. Suppress is depression. We need expression. That's right. And I know that's hard, especially if it's hard for you to express yourself. And I think that is a very positive thing you said. I think that is very beautiful. But I know it's hard, when a person is being bullied, because on top of being bullied, you're scared you know. But I'll tell you this, for bullies, their future can be very dim, because what I mean by that is there's only two ways that bullies can end up. They may end up in jail, or sadly in the grave, and we wouldn't. I don't want that for anyone's future. I don't want you to end up in jail, and I don't want you to end up in the grave. I don't want your future to be dim. It's wrong, and it's hateful, and it tears people down. Karma is real, baby. Yes, it is. And remember, when you are born on this earth to love, to live, to be happy, to live life abundantly. Don't let nobody steal that from you. Just don't. Which opens me to a short story that I had, and I call this the kid that everybody laughed at. And if you can relate, and if while I'm talking, you be like, oh yeah, I can relate, then just feel free. So imagine that there was this boy in school, a younger boy in school. He's quiet, and he goes to school and he pretty much stays to himself. He doesn't always have the newest shoes. What you do to others will come back to you. Yes, ma'am. That is life circle, or sir, that is life circles. What goes around comes around. So be careful how you treat people, because we are still human beings, and pain is real. Pain doesn't discriminate your age. Pain doesn't discriminate color. It's real. So as I'm telling the story of this, young boy. He was in school. He didn't have the newest clothes. They wasn't necessarily not new. They just wasn't name brand. And his shoes, they wasn't name brand. And every year, he would carry the same backpack. Well, one year, a group of children started patronizing him. They were laughing at him, saying things like, oh, why are you wearing those shoes? And the thing about when one person starts to essentially make you feel bad, sometimes other people start to tune into that. And that can you imagine? That's like not a good feeling. And so now that child was standing there and there's all these people joining in and just imagine how that child feels. They gotta walk into that school thinking, who's gonna say something to me today? Will I make it through this day? And that's not a good feeling. And feeling that fear before you even get on the school bus, fear before you even go to your first class. Because here's the thing, you know, here's a question that I have that someone sent to me. It was, what should you do if you see somebody being bullied? Now, see, that's a tricky question. What should you do if you see someone being bullied? First of all, my advice is don't be a part of the audience, right? Don't be a part of the audience. What do you do if you see someone being bullied? I say, don't be a part of the audience. Wise man once said to me, what you wish for others. That's right. And I was a wise person. And you can answer that question too. What do you do if you see someone being bullied? I say, do not become a part of that audience. Meaning, there are a lot of people that see things happening to people and they just watch, and that's not good either, you know. But you don't have to necessarily fight someone or threaten them or be the superhero of the school. Sometimes it's simply saying, that's not cool or leave them alone. And that can sometimes interrupt the whole situation of what's going on. And if the situation is unsafe, then that's where you'll get outside help, right? As tell a teacher, if you're a child, tell your parent or a teacher, tell somebody that's responsible. Evil exists when good men see bad and do. That's the thing we cannot escape from is evil's all through this world. There's no we can't stop the evil, but what you can do is how you participate. You know, you don't have to participate in those things. And if half of the world thought like that, maybe a lot of the bullying would stop because in actuality we can't stop all mean people. It would be wonderful if we could, make mean people not do mean things. Never look down on anyone unless you're that's a beautiful statement. Never look down on someone unless you're helping them. Hello. That is so true. You don't, you know, if you're unless you're gonna help them because you never know the way that life be life in, the same person that you're laughing at, that you're making fun of, that you're mocking, will be the very one person that you might need. And you might be that person that's down bad and needs someone to hold you up and not treat you like SHIT you know so stepping in can also potentially change the whole scenario because sometimes I've had people say to me, how am I supposed to help someone that's getting bullied? I don't want to get my ass kicked, trying to help the next person. And in actuality, that is true because sometimes this goes to say, pick your battles, right? um, because I've had someone say to me before I had this discussion, they're like, I'm a grown man, right? And if I see another man as a grown man bully another man, I'm not going to say, hey, get your hands off that man, or I'm not going to intervene because potentially, they said they could be putting themselves at risk. And which I can understand. You are a wise woman. Please continue to change your wish to see. That's right. Yeah, I continue to try to change. We can only try. To continue, and you do the same. You keep that positivity like you have. Like life is so beautiful with positivity. So, um, so I agree with you on that. So thank you. So as I was saying, and that person was worried essentially like saying, hey, if I get in the middle of this other grown person bullying this other grown person, this potentially could get me in a mess that I'm not ready for. Like I'm just trying to help. And sometimes that goes to show where you got to pick your battles, right? You pick your struggle, you pick your battles. I think that, being quiet about it and being bullied and not telling no one, I think that is unsafe because, if you're being bullied at school and you're not telling anyone because you're afraid of what, they'll say, well, you shouldn't be this or this shouldn't be. But I think you should tell because you got to carry that with you. And if you don't have nowhere to let that out, to have someone help you, whether it's a teacher or somebody that can seesaw that, because like I said, you can't change everybody, you can only try, you know. And so if you are, if you're a child and your child comes home, listen before you lecture, listen to that child and see what's going on. How long has this been happening? You know, don't don't immediately get on the defense. Let's hear what our children are saying. We can't ignore them, but we can help. We can do our best to help our children. But this is also what I've also learned. And, also standing your ground, you know, s- you know, in life, you have to stand up for yourself. I'm not saying you got to put fist to someone's face to stand up for yourself, but standing up for yourself is maturity. Sometimes standing up for yourself is walking away. Sometimes standing for yourself is picking that certain fight that I'm not going to do, or standing for yourself is saying, I don't like how you're talking to me, and that will not be accepted. Now, not everybody's going to be like, okay, I get that. You're going to have people that will challenge that, right? But mind over matter, because our children, they don't need to hear lectures. They need to hear somebody that's listening to them. Teenagers and young adults, they need to hear that. Some people think that bullying just disappeared when they leave high school. No, but you would think that they would graduate from high school, but they didn't graduate from the foolishness, and that happens a lot. Like, gosh, where is this going to end, right? You can still be grown and encounter bullying, right? You can encounter it at work, college, online, even with a group of friends. You could be amongst friends, and that's that one friend that constantly always embarrasses that other friend, and talks about their appearances or talk about their weight or mocks their accent, you know, um, or talks about them being too thin or talks about them financially, or their relationship status, or, and then when that person gets upset, sometimes the storm changed. You're like, no, I was just joking. Does it make it better that you were joking? Because it doesn't take the pain away, because it absolutely does not, right? It doesn't make you better. It doesn't make you feel better, because if a joke requires you to be humiliated or to make fun of, then that's not a joke. That's no longer a joke. The joke is not funny. Now the old me, before I started my journey, you know, that where I'm at now, the old me, I'm not gonna lie to you, if someone try to front me off or embarrassing me, I might slap the taste out your mouth. The old me, uh, just for an example, I'm just being real. You start talking crazy and you're disrespecting me. The old me might slap the taste out your mouth. Was that a good thing? No, it's called growth. So now, I don't I cannot see someone bullying me, because one, my skin is too thick for that. And believe it or not, I've been through that on this podcast. I've had people come over here and just say some absolutely bully mean stuff. But guess what? I'm so far into my season that those words cannot hurt me. Because somebody might can take 2 seconds to write a comment. And then someone may take that comment and it may take them 10 years to not believe that comment about them. You know, which brings me to this quick story. I have a lot of those stories, and if you have one, feel free. Um, what I do want to say before I tell that story, like I said, the old me might have slapped you, but it's simple. Now I'm more simple. Like, move around with that. I ain't got time for that, and quit talking that way. You get those warnings, you get those levels. Like, don't, do not, please don't. You know. Which brings me to my second story. I was saying that, so there's two coworkers, right? And one coworker was constantly making jokes, about another coworker. Every Monday, she might talk about what the girl got on, and then on Tuesday, she might ask her, why you wear that dress, and everybody at that time, hey, how you doing? They would laugh, but then she would go home Because she would even laugh while they were laughing. You ever met someone that's in fight or flight and they're getting made in front of and they're getting bullied and they laugh it out, but then they go home and they feel terrible because, their fight or flight was to laugh while they're saying these mean things. So I'm going to laugh with them. But then when they got home, they felt terrible on the inside. and and she was hurting, and her fight or flight again was to laugh it off. Do you know a lot of people do that, when they're hurting, they laugh it off, they laugh off the pain and then go home and cry at night. And no, that's not healthy for your mental. That's not healthy for you in general. It's not healthy for your heart. It's not healthy for any of us, right? And I knew that, you know, people will continue to laugh. And I know that, like I said, a lot of people's fight or flight is to laugh certain situation. Now you be in a situation, you get scared, you might laugh. Like I said, people start talking about you, you might laugh it off and even talk about yourself. And that's no good because now you're downplaying you. And that's again, that is some people flight or flight. And one day, the girl comes into work and she was not laughing at the jokes anymore, right? And so when the girl made a joke about her appearance, she did not say an aggressive way. She was very calm, but to the point. She said, "Please stop making comments about me before things get really real in here." Now, nobody knew what she meant when she said really real, but I had an idea of what she meant. The girl says, "Oh no, I was just joking." But does that erase the hurt? Like you're doing all this and then you tell me you're joking? Is that supposed to erase the hurt? Absolutely no, it does not. It does not erase the hurt. Like your intent was to hurt my feelings because intent is real. And the impact of those words is real too, because like I said, nobody knows what she was going through because when she went home, she sang a different tone until she got tired and she said, "Hey, cut all that out. I'm done with that. It's not funny anymore. I don't like it." And, you know, she didn't realize, I don't think at the time, maybe the person that was saying all these things didn't realize that it was hurting her. And so, believe it or not, she told her, "You know what? I didn't realize that." And she told her, "I'm sorry, and I'll stop." And that's maturity and that's growth because if she didn't recognize that she was hurting her feelings, she did at that point when she finally said, "Hey, this is not going to happen. This has got to end." Now, can we talk about social media? Because, baby, some people will get behind the screen and suddenly become WWE champions. They become judges, lawyers, and FBI all in one big scenario. They're all these things, right? And they're behind the screen. And there are people that's behind that online that would say things behind the screen that would never say to you in your face. And I think that has a lot to do with the screen protecting them because like I said, I've had bullies on my podcast, believe it or not. And I mean, again, they tried, they attempted to bully me, but like I said, with my growth and with my thick skin, I wasn't having it. Like it couldn't be broken. I just let you have your comments and let them be. I'm not gonna argue about it. I'm not gonna call you a bunch of names or even get on the boat with you about that because I'm just not gonna do that, right? Because behind the screen you're still a human being. There are comments that you would probably say to a person behind the screen, again, like I said, that you would never say to their face. So when you post a comment, think about that. Would I say this to this person's face? And I know that somebody behind her will be like, and damn right, I'll say it in their face. I'll say it, I'll say it, I'll say it. It doesn't make it right, right? It doesn't make it right. And again, at this point, again, like I said, pick your battles because guess what? Blocking is real. When you're on social media, blocking is real. You can block that person. Someone said, "What do you do if someone is bullying you online?" Well, don't fight fire with fire, right? Don't add fuel to the fire, right? You can block them. As crazy as that may sound, you can report them. You can save evidence till it's appropriate again. Tell someone, what's going on, or, you don't have to give them access to you. That's what I'm saying. And please believe that you don't have to respond to everything that a person has put on the screen for you. You don't have to respond to disrespect. And sometimes, you know, it's hard. It's hard not to respond when people are being disrespectful, but it's easy as blocking them. No long speech, no paragraphs. Don't write a 47 excuse letter on why you don't like it. No, just block. Now let's talk about something, and it was like, well, what about men? Men are human too, right? Because men experience bullying, and sometimes society, they'll tell men, don't cry, man up. Don't let nobody see you hurt. But being a real man doesn't mean you have feelings, right? Being a real man does not mean that you don't can't say, hey, this is hurting me. This is too much. I don't like it. You know, you're still human to that question. You know, maybe a teenager would say, this person is picking on me. And maybe a younger man could say, I don't know what else to do. Can you help me? And none of these things make that person or that man a weak man, because men deserve respect. They're still humans. Women deserve respect. Children, teenagers, your grandparents, older people. We all deserve the basic human respect, correct? And women, honey, I know we can be brutal with other women. We can, no matter what. We can be very brutal as women, Um, no matter what you say or what you do, honey, somebody somewhere is not going to approve of what you're doing. It's going to be somebody saying, I don't like her hair, or she thinks she's cute. It's going to always be somebody that has something to say, or she thinks she's um, better than everybody. I started about a year, about 2.5 years ago. I started my trans journey to becoming a better me, because I had one day, realized that at the motion I was going, allowing other people to make me feel sad, or, allowing other people, places, and things to slow me down for what was really meant for me to do in life. And so it's been about 2.5 years, and it's been actually the growth is still growing. Um, and I learn more and more every day. I get stronger every day, and thank you for asking. Nobody's never asked me that, so that thank you very much. That is very nice of you asking me that. As like I said, women, we can say some brutal things to each other, but I will say this, women. Just because, she looks prettier, or you think she's prettier than you, it doesn't mean that you're not pretty. Just because she has a better outfit or better body that you think, it doesn't mean that it makes you less beautiful. There is room for all of us to be beautiful. There is room for everybody, for men, women, all of us. So, don't join in when people are, hurting other people. Don't laugh, don't forward that video or make that post or send that screenshot. Don't add fire to the fuel to the fire. Do you see oh my God, I said don't add fire to the fuel. Don't add fuel to the fire. Which brings me to a question. What do you do if you see someone being bullied? Well, again, I said you can speak up or refuse to laugh, refuse to share a hateful comment. Uh, you can check on somebody, you can listen to them, you can ask if they're okay, because sometimes those four words, are you okay, could change everything about someone, you know. Which brings me to my last and final story. Now, I call this story, She Finally Stood Up for Herself. And I won't take up too much of you guys' time because I know it's in the evening. I know you guys want to get to eating dinner and type things like that. And respectfully, I will, give you guys that because I know you guys need to eat. I call this story "She Finally Stood Up for Herself." Now, this story is true, and I knew this woman. She's in her 30s now. Um, But and she's a very sweet person, you know. She's the quiet type. She's the type of person that she'll walk into a room. She doesn't expect attention from everybody. She minds her own business. She keeps to herself. You know, she goes about her day. But what people didn't know about her is that she carried something with her for so many years. Like it started in elementary school, you know. There was a particular girl that would pick on her every day, you know, would pick on her and nobody stepped in, you know, and this same girl will repeatedly pick on her, you know. Now I don't know if no one stepped in because at that time they was also scared of the bully or they didn't want to be the next target or they thought it wasn't their business. Either way, they didn't step in. But when you're the person that's being essentially picked on and everybody is standing around watching you, it feels like everyone is betraying you, right? And then speed past high school. And you would think that in high school, you know, everybody would grow up a little bit, but the same girl, same behavior, she was bullying her even more. She continued. It got even worse. You know, the comments started being even more worse. She talked about her shoes. She talked about her home. She talked about her parents. She did whatever she could to embarrass and humiliate her and make her feel less than. Um, Now, mind you, this is the same girl, right? And year after year, this was going on. And can you imagine waking up, you know, going somewhere and somewhere along your way, you know that somebody's determined to make your day straight miserable. And eventually that kind of treatment started to get in her head. It got in her confidence and it made her question herself like, why is she doing this? Why is this happening? And then the bullying became physical. You know, she would pull her hair a little bit here or there and then push her a little bit here and there. And she kept taking it and she kept ignoring it, you know. She just wasn't reacting until one day, well, she had enough. Now, let me be clear. Putting your hands on someone doesn't always solve the solution. Most of the time, it doesn't. But sometimes people don't understand how much pain a person has to carry or what they've been carrying until they reach their breaking point, right? And the quiet girl, she reached her breaking point. She wasn't having it. Something in her snapped and said, enough's enough. And guess what? When she came around trying that same old bullying, a fight broke out, and that girl put belt to ass real quick. Nobody seen that coming. Like she whooped her ass, and nobody broke it up for a while, you know. And then when the fight was finally broke up, you know, I think that the bully learned something that day. She learned that the girl had hands. Obviously, she learned that the girl could fight. That she was reserving her hands, you know, for as long as she could. Um, Nobody even knew the girl could fight, right? And that's okay. You know, she showed out, and people were shocked to see her take up for herself. And the fight was bad. I mean, real bad. She whooped her ass pretty good. But afterwards, you know, a few weeks later, something happened unexpectedly. The bully stopped completely. The bullying completely stopped. That girl who has spent years and years making that one girl's life miserable, she no longer bothered her. It was almost like that's what needed to happen. And the best part is this is what nobody expected. They became friends. Not just friends, they became best friends. Now ain't that something, right? They became best friends. The person that made her feel like she was never enough eventually became somebody she could laugh with, talk with, and trust. And life's funny like that sometimes, you know. Sometimes people have to grow up, you know. Sometimes people finally realize the damage that they cause people. And sometimes, you know, realizing that you hurt somebody for so many years completely can make them be a different good person, right? Years later, you know, but listen, you know, I just want you to know that standing up for yourself doesn't always mean you have to fight. Right? Sometimes it means you're saying, "Don't talk to me like that," or walking away. You know, if you're in school and you're a younger child, go tell your teachers, go tell a parent. and somebody that can help you, because sometimes it means blocking, it means leaving the relationship, or looking in the mirror and telling yourself, I deserve better and I will stand up for myself. Simply means that refusing, and it means refusing to believe the lies that someone is saying about you, about yourself. Don't believe the lies, because that young girl, didn't suddenly become valuable when she fought back. She was already valuable. She didn't all of a sudden become worthy because of the bully. She was already worthy. So please don't let someone else's cruelty convince you that there's something wrong with you. Now, I'm glad that had a happy ending. They went from "I can't stand you" to "Girl, what we eating." They went from friends to best friends, and that was a beautiful ending. Of course, all endings are not like that, but that was a beautiful ending to me. But if you've ever been bullied or picked on, embarrassed, or they made you feel like you wasn't enough, remember this: your story doesn't end with what someone says about you. you know, you get to decide what happens next. Because that quiet little girl, she was learning her strength. And when she found it, she never looked at herself the same way again. And that's the joy of that story, is that she survived. She didn't just survive the bullying. She survived it without losing herself. Oh my gosh. And somewhere along the way, her enemy had became her best friend. Now that's a plot twist, and I didn't even see that coming. So now I know you guys are probably sitting there like, well, wait, wait, Lavonda, you just told us this whole story. All the characters, both parties. Where was you at? What side was you in? And to be honest with you guys, I wasn't on either side. I was on the side that is to be the right side. I was that person that said, this isn't right. Because if I saw some bullying, I would say something. I'm going to say something first, and with my words. That doesn't mean I'm going around punching on people. No. Sometimes my words were just strong enough. I believe that, you can stand up for yourself without being the problem. You understand? Or you maybe can stand up for someone without being the problem. You know, and sometimes, you got to be careful with standing up for people. Um, for instance, if you're walking down the street and you see someone being, something going wrong to them, call the police, because sometimes you could get involved. And again, I don't want you to get hurt trying to, essentially save someone else. You can still help, but there's other ways to help. So what can we do? What can we do? Let's wrap this conversation up with a good solution. What can we do? I can say this. If you are being bullied, please don't suffer quietly. If you are a parent, listen before lecture. And if you are a teacher, you know, take those reports seriously. Um, and if you a friend, check on your peoples. You know, if you're online, think about it before you post it. You know what I mean? And if you are a bystander, don't become a part of the crowd, right? And if you are a bully, stop. Just stop. If you realize that you are hurting someone, apologize, change it, do better, because growth isn't saying that's who I am. Growth is saying that's who I used to be and I'm better than that. I'm better than that, right? And that's just my opinion, right? I don't think as people we can completely stop every evil, bully, mean person on this earth. Let's be real, right? But somebody somewhere is probably upset right now because the grocery store done ran out their favorite cereal. We can't control everybody, right? But we can control on how we participate, right? We can control, what we encourage. We can control what we share. We can control how we trust people. We can control that if it's enough for us to decide that I'm not going to laugh at this. I'm not going to participate in this. I'm going to speak up. And if we all thought like that, just imagine how things could be different, right? And just like that, family, I've reached the end of the show. We talked about bullying, but most important, we talked about being a human being, right? Because that's what we all are. We're all human beings. You deserve respect. We all deserve respect. Children deserve respect. Teenagers, everybody, all deserve it. So, before I go, I want somebody to know that you don't always have to fight. You know, sometimes you don't know nobody's fight behind that smile that you see. You know, so don't make those jokes. And if you're being bullied, please stop. You are somebody, and you are smart, you're beautiful, you're handsome, and you are worthy. And I thank all of you guys for showing up with me this evening. As I said before, my birthday is coming up September 25th. At the same time, I will be rebirthing the Here and Now podcast merch. I'm excited about that. And so I hope that you guys will be excited with me. I will be on the air on the 25th of September, even though that's a Friday, and my shows are Tuesdays and Thursdays. But on that particular day, I will be rebirthing, yeah, that merch for the Here and Now show, and I'm sure that you guys will love it. Maybe you'll purchase. That would be a blessing. And you guys know that before I get off the air, I'll stay here another 5, 10 minutes. If you have any questions about today's topic or just questions in general, feel free. Um, I enjoy everyone that came in. I know this is kind of a tough subject, but we made it, right? We made it through that. So if you have any questions or any comments, I try to acknowledge everyone that came into the studio today, and thank you so much. I've actually been on the air for 42 minutes, which is absolutely great with me. I think for the evening, I think that I'm going to cook me something, a little something good for dinner. Got any ideas out there? I'd love to hear them. I might do something quick like a pasta. It's always my favorite. Um, so with that being said, I don't think we have any questions or any comments. But I thank you guys for spending 42 minutes with me upon the hour. It's been a blessing. I will be back on Tuesday of next week. And I'll be back smiling and listening to jazz. Again, if you have any questions or any comments, please feel free to like, subscribe, follow, leave a comment. It is because of you guys that I continue to keep showing up. Uh, I'm sorry, I was reading something. See how you get sidetracked? I thought it was a comment, but I appreciate you guys showing up, showing out. And if there isn't any more questions or there's nothing anyone else has to say, I think everybody's probably like getting ready for dinner. Thank you so much for tuning in. Your girl, Lavonda Ray. Good night. Uh oh.